Hi, I'm Mike Lowe, and today we're looking at the new Sony Alpha A33. This is a new type of camera, and although it may look like a traditional SLR, it's actually part of a new SLT category, which means single lens translucent. The key difference here is that the mirror on the inside, which in a DSLR would usually move out the way to allow light to pass to the sensor, is now translucent and allows light to pass continually, so that mechanical movement has been removed. The sensor at the heart of the A33 is a 14.2 megapixel APS-C HD CMOS sensor, much like that found in the Sony NEX series. The Sony Barnes processor is capable of images up to ISO 12800 at full resolution, and there's also a variety of modes for both beginners and those more familiar with using cameras and shooting. The mode dial over here, you've got the standard manual shutter aperture and priority settings, but there's also auto plus and auto modes, as well as a variety of scene modes and sweep panorama and the 7 frames per second continuous shooting mode here. On the rear there's a 3-inch 920,000 dot LCD screen, which is on a tilt angle bracket at the rear like so. This means it can be stowed for protection as well as rotating through various angles. Above this there's an electronic viewfinder, and that's one of the key things about this type of system, is that due to less light passing through the translucent mirror, not as much light is able to reach what an optical viewfinder would be able to provide, and so Sony put in an electronic system. In this case it's a 1.15 million dot electronic viewfinder, and it provides a 100% field of view. When in live view modes, this camera is capable of continuous autofocus during continuous shooting. That is, it can shoot at 7 frames per second, but between each of these frames it can predict and focus on a moving subject, whether it's coming towards or going away from you. This is something that's not usually found at this kind of level, and is a benefit of the technology provided from the translucent mirror. The reason for this is because the translucent mirror itself will let light pass whilst also reflecting a certain amount to a phase detection autofocus sensor on the inside of the camera. Because the light can pass through and the focus is being detected simultaneously, the mirror needn't move out the way when taking a shot, and so there's just a constant stream of focus that's possible. The particular benefit of this is actually in movie mode, because where most other systems use a contrast detection system that's potentially quite slow and can be a little bit inaccurate when autofocusing, this new system is very swift and will constantly focus on whatever autofocus point is selected while shooting. However, there can be one or two issues during shooting because of this as well. When shooting movies, it's either possible to shoot manually or entirely in an auto mode. You can pre-select the aperture beforehand, but if a subject were to move into the frame, the camera would opt to focus on that unless you were set entirely to manual mode. So though it's a big step up in terms of what autofocus can do in movie mode for DSLR type cameras, it still needs some small bits of work, and the future in this kind of series should see some big developments in that area. When shooting in the 1080i movie mode, the 16:9 ratio screen on the back is the right ratio for shooting movies. However, when you frame up a shot and then actually click the movie button, it slightly crops into the image due to the difference between what you see and what the movie is going to record, so it's not ideal for this. Also, 3:2 stills shots crop in on the actual screen itself. You get black borders at the side here. The A33 also benefits from a new 15-point autofocus system. This is quite effective in good light, although the main enemy of this camera really is in a low light situation. Like most Sony DSLR cameras at this level, there's no AF lamp to assist in framing up in darker conditions. It can use the flash as a pre-flash in order to light the subject, but this is less effective and can also be considerably distracting. The autofocus points themselves are generally quite centrally arranged across the sensor, so don't expect an edge-to-edge focus system, but nonetheless it's still fairly standard compared to what most cameras at this level offer, and is very effective. Also, the electronic viewfinder, although it's pretty much as good as they get at the moment, it may not be to everyone's tastes. It's certainly not as bright as an optical viewfinder would be, and there can be some image lag when moving, particularly in lower light. And the same goes for image noise, which can become quite visible again in lower light conditions. That said, this is kind of new technology, and it's for perhaps a newer audience, and it's quite an exciting prospect to see that Sony are bold enough to put such technology in a DSLR-like camera. The A33's kit lens is an 18 to 55mm, which is f3.5 to 5.6. It can be a little bit noisy in operation and a bit clunky. This isn't a problem for stills, but it's mainly movie when it can kind of judder between zooms. However, it does benefit from being exceptionally good in macro mode. Whether you're on the 18 or even the 55mm setting, you can focus subject as close as 12 centimeters away from the end of the lens for some pretty impressive shots. One recurring question is whether the image quality of this camera is as good as that of a DSLR. The main reason for this is because only 70% of the light actually passes through the translucent mirror to the sensor. In real terms, that's a loss of a third of a stop, but because an image sensor doesn't have a base sensitivity like film would, it can quite easily compensate for this, and a third of a stop isn't too much. So the short answer is no, the image quality is just as good as that you'd find from a DSLR camera. There's also another slight issue with very subtle ghosting, but this can only occur at pretty extreme circumstances where there are small and clipped out highlights. In terms of image noise, the shots are pretty clean and clear from ISO 100 through to ISO 800. There's a slight grain that begins to creep in above this, although ISO 1600 and 3200 are perfectly usable for most situations. For £650 with the kit lens, the A33 has a pretty attractive price point. The main reason for this is its 7 frames per second continuous autofocus, which is unlike anything else in this price range. You'd have to step up to a Nikon D300S, which would cost pretty much twice as much in order to achieve this. The camera's very good, but it won't necessarily be for everybody, mainly down to the electronic viewfinder. There aren't too many qualms with this because it does actually offer some new technology such as a dual axis level, and you can see the focus points through the eye very easily and they light up and so forth. But it's just not quite the same as perhaps a traditional DSLR enthusiast may expect. Overall, we gave it 89% in our recommended award.